this seat right now! I told you 3 times, this is unauthorized! You are being completely unreasonable!
I am reporting an assault. I need help here. The flight attendant and this man attacked me. Huh? Oh my God, what have I done?
You are not getting on this plane. You are under arrest. You have no authority. Please, calm down, everyone.
Boots. Sit down somewhere else. This seat isn't yours anymore. Vanessa Reid stood in the aisle of Highline Airways Flight 5112, her boarding pass glowing on her phone screen, and looked at a stranger sitting in seat 2A, wearing her seat like it had always belonged to him. Boots. He had a glass of champagne balanced on the armrest and a leather duffel bag taking up the overhead space she'd reserved 11 days ago. Boots. Behind her, the line of boarding passengers had already begun to stall, rolling suitcases bumping into calves, someone's toddler asking why the plane wasn't moving. Boots. She did not raise her voice. She had learned a long time ago that raising your voice was exactly what people wanted from a woman who looked like her, standing where she was standing, in a cabin like this one. Boots. I'm assigned to 2A, she said instead, and held up the screen. The flight attendant blocking her path, a woman with a name tag that read Bree, gave her the smile people give when they are trying to make an inconvenience disappear before the door closes. Boots. We had to make a small adjustment, Bree said. There's a comparable seat available in the main cabin. What adjustment? Boots. Bree's voice dropped, as if lowering it made the sentence more reasonable. Mr. Wade is one of our platinum guests. Boots. The man in 2A looked up from his phone for exactly long enough to confirm he had heard his own name, then went back to it. Boots. Preston Wade. 58 years old, gray at the temples, chairman of Wade Meridian Hospitality Group, the kind of man whose face showed up often enough in business journals that flight crews learned his preferences the way you learn a difficult relative's. Boots. Vanessa had built Sterling Bridge Advisory on exactly this kind of moment, the gap between what people said had happened and what had actually happened. Boots. 16 employees, 4 office plants she kept forgetting to water, and a reputation for finding the sentence in a supply contract that everyone else had skimmed past. Boots. Her clients paid her, specifically to notice when the paperwork and the reality stopped agreeing with each other. And right now, on this airplane at 6:41 in the morning, something did not agree. Boots. Bree had not scanned her boarding pass. She had not opened the manifest. She had not asked Preston Wade to show his. Boots. She had simply decided, the way people sometimes decide things without noticing they've decided them, who looked more like they belonged in 2A. Boots. Who authorized this? Vanessa asked. The gate team. Which gate agent? What's their name? Bree's smile thinned by exactly 1 degree. Boots. Ma'am, we're already behind schedule. That wasn't a name. Vanessa noted it the way she noted everything, quietly, permanently, the way her father used to tell her to notice things. Boots. Make them write down what they're doing, he used to say, after a hotel clerk once made him produce 3 forms of identification, while waving a white couple through with a wink and a room key. Boots. Somebody has to keep the record straight, Vanessa. Otherwise, the story just becomes whatever the last person to speak decided it was. Boots. She set her briefcase down on the floor of the aisle, which in retrospect was the exact moment everything on Flight 522 stopped being a small thing. Boots. Vanessa Reid was 44 years old and had spent 22 of those years walking into rooms where somebody assumed she was the assistant, the caterer, or lost. Boots. She had stopped correcting people out loud a long time ago. Instead, she corrected the record, emails time-stamped, meetings summarized in writing an hour after they happened, contracts read twice before she signed anything. Boots. It made her slow to trust and fast to document, 2 habits that had built Sterling Bridge from a folding table in her apartment into an 11th floor office on Peachtree Street, with 16 salaries she made sure never bounced. Boots. This particular Tuesday morning mattered more than most. In 4 hours and 19 minutes, she was supposed to be standing in a conference room in downtown Denver, presenting the final resilience model for a $2. Boots. $3 million distribution contract with Whitmore Distribution Group, a deal she had spent 11 months building, 1 warehouse audit, and 1 vendor interview at a time. Boots. If she missed the 11 a.m. session, Whitmore's board had made it clear the bid would reopen to 2 larger firms with names people recognized without having to be told what they did. Boots. She had chosen seat 2A specifically, Not for the champagne, not for the extra legroom. Boots. She needed 3 uninterrupted hours to rebuild the transportation model one more time. Because 2 nights ago, her junior analyst, a sharp 26-year-old named Talia's newest hire, had found an assumption buried in the warehouse data that changed the whole shape of the pitch. Boots. Vanessa had not slept more than 4 hours since. Her laptop bag held 211 pages of printed backup, color-coded, because that was how she thought clearly under pressure, with paper she could touch. Boots. Preston Wade, meanwhile, had no idea any of that existed. He knew only that his original seat, 4D, had a broken reading light, and a flight attendant, who called him, one of our platinum guests, had waved him forward with the practiced ease of someone solving a rich man's inconvenience before he even finished complaining about it. Boots. 2 different mornings, 2 different sets of stakes. They had never been designed to collide, and yet here they were in the same 9 square feet of cabin, about to find out which one the airline had decided mattered more. Boots. The younger flight attendant near the galley had stopped restocking the beverage cart. His name tag read Marcus. Boots. He was maybe 24, still new enough to flinch a little at conflict instead of managing it, and his eyes moved from Vanessa's phone screen to a printed passenger manifest, clipped beside the service cabinet. The old-fashioned paper backup most passengers never knew still existed. Boots. Marcus, Bree said without turning around. Finish the cart. He hesitated 1 full second before obeying. Vanessa noticed the hesitation the way she noticed everything. Boots. It told her something Bree's smile hadn't. Whatever was happening here, at least one person in this cabin already knew it wasn't right. Boots. Who authorized the change? Vanessa asked again, quieter this time, which somehow made it land harder. I told you, the gate team. Boots. I need a name. Behind her, a businessman sighed loudly enough to make a point of it. Someone farther back in coach called out asking what the holdup was. Boots. The overhead vents hummed. The cabin smelled like burnt coffee and the lemon cleaner they used between flights, and none of it moved. Boots. Preston Wade finally looked up properly, closing his laptop with the unhurried motion of a man who had never once in his adult life worried about being asked to leave a room. Boots. Look, he said, leaning slightly into the aisle. I have a connection in Denver and a board call at 1. Boots. I didn't ask to sit here. They moved me. That's probably true, Vanessa said. It still isn't your seat to keep. Boots. He studied her for a second. Not with malice, she thought, but with the mild surprise of a man encountering resistance from somewhere he hadn't expected it. Boots. Then he opened his laptop again, which told her everything about how far his discomfort was willing to go. Vanessa turned back to Bree. Boots. Check the manifest, before you take something from me that I paid for. For half a second, Bree actually reached for the clipboard. Boots. Then Marcus, without looking up from the cart, said one sentence, quiet enough that only the 2 of them heard it. Boots. 2 A's still under Reid. Bree's face changed for exactly a heartbeat. Not surprise, Vanessa thought. Something closer to irritation, the look of someone whose plan had just acquired a witness. Boots. She folded the manifest shut without opening it. The lead supervisor already approved the accommodation, Bree said, her voice sliding into something formal and rehearsed. Boots. If you continue to refuse crew instructions, I'll have to document this as non-compliant behavior. There it was. Vanessa felt the heat climb under the collar of her blouse, the particular heat of watching a disagreement about a seat get quietly relabeled as a disagreement about her character. Boots. She thought of her father again, 40 years gone now, standing at that hotel counter with his jaw tight and his voice level, saying nothing except, please write down exactly what you are accusing me of. Boots. I am not refusing a safety instruction, she said. I am disputing an unauthorized reassignment. Those are 2 different sentences. Boots. I need you to understand the difference before you write either one down. Bree's hand moved toward the intercom button on the bulkhead. Boots. Then we'll let the captain decide. Across the galley, while every eye in the front cabin was on that exchange, Marcus quietly slid the paper manifest out from under the clip and tucked it beneath the service binder, out of sight. Boots. Vanessa caught it happening in her peripheral vision and filed it away without comment. She didn't know yet whether he was protecting her or protecting himself. Boots. She only knew that somebody on this airplane had already decided how this story was going to end, and they were racing to make it official before the facts could catch up. Boots. The captain did not come out. Instead, a broad-shouldered man in a charcoal vest stepped out of the flight deck area and introduced himself as Grant Ashby, lead cabin supervisor. Boots. He listened to Bree for less than 30 seconds while Vanessa stood 3 feet away, close enough to hear every word. Boots. She was offered an equivalent accommodation, Bree said. She's refusing to cooperate with the crew. Not once did she mention that the manifest, the one she just refused to open, still listed 2A under Reid. Boots. Grant turned to Vanessa with the particular blankness of a man who had already decided the shape of the problem, before he'd heard both halves of it. Boots. Ma'am, I understand you're holding up boarding over a seating dispute. No, Vanessa said. I'm asking why my confirmed, paid seat was reassigned without my knowledge or consent. Boots. Sometimes we make operational adjustments. For what operational reason? His pause was small, but she caught it. Passenger accommodation. That isn't an operational reason. Boots. That's a decision somebody made and is now trying to make sound like policy. Behind her, the line had gone fully still. Boots. A child near the front door asked his mother loudly why nobody was sitting down. Warm jet bridge air kept leaking into the chilled cabin every time the forward door shifted. Boots. Grant held out his hand. May I see your boarding pass? She handed him the phone. He looked at seat 2A. Boots. He looked at the manifest, still folded in Bree's hand. Not the one Marcus had hidden, a duplicate she'd apparently printed at the gate. And something in his face tightened for just a second before smoothing back out. Boots. The gate system may not have synced properly, he said, and handed the phone back. Then check the gate record. Boots. Grant, we're already 14 minutes behind schedule. Bree cut in. Marcus glanced up at the galley clock. 14 minutes. Vanessa noticed that the number seemed to matter to him specifically, in a way it didn't seem to matter to anyone else in the cabin, and she filed that away too. Boots. Preston Wade rose from 2A entirely on his own, no one asking him to. He was tall enough that his shoulder nearly grazed the overhead bin. Boots. I can just move, he said. Mr. Wade, that isn't necessary, Bree said quickly, her voice softening in a way it hadn't softened for Vanessa in the entire exchange. Boots. It seems fairly necessary, he said, and for the first time, Vanessa looked at him without irritation. He had benefited from whatever had happened here. Boots. He no longer looked comfortable being the reason for it. He stepped into the aisle. Then handle it, he said to Grant, by putting the passenger whose name is actually on the seat in the seat. Boots. Grant rubbed the bridge of his nose. Sir, please remain in the aisle while we verify. A woman in a Highline gate jacket appeared at the forward door. Renata Ford, according to her badge, departure coordinator. Boots. Bree spoke before Vanessa could. Renata, you reassigned 2A for Mr. Wade, correct? Renata frowned. No. The words seemed to flatten every other sound in the cabin. The hum of the ventilation, a rolling suitcase wheel somewhere behind them, the muted chime of the boarding scanner outside the door. Boots. Bree's hand froze on the intercom cord. I upgraded Mr. Wade from 4D because his reading light was broken, Renata said. Boots. I moved him to 2C, that seat's still open. Wade looked across the aisle. 2C sat empty, exactly as she'd said. Boots. Grant flipped the manifest open again. Then who moved him to 2A? I didn't, Renata said flatly. Bree exhaled through her nose. Boots. The system must have updated it after boarding started. Marcus spoke from the galley, quietly enough that it took a second for everyone to register. He'd said anything at all. Boots. The system didn't. Every head turned. He swallowed hard. I checked the printed load sheet before doors opened. Reid was 2A. Boots. Wade was 2C. That's what it said before any of this. Bree's stare sharpened at him like a blade catching light. Boots. Marcus, I'm just repeating what the terminal showed me. His fingers pressed into the edge of the service counter, knuckles pale. Boots. Grant shifted into the low managing tone of a man trying to regain control of a room. All right, there may have been an internal communication error. Boots. Mr. Wade has already offered to move. Miss Reid, if we can just get you seated. She should have taken the seat. Boots. She knew that. Denver was 4 hours and now she checked her phone 11 minutes away. Whitmore's board did not care about airline seating disputes. Boots. They cared about whether Sterling Bridge could deliver on time, under pressure, without drama, which was, ironically, the entire premise of the pitch she'd built her whole career defending. Boots. But she looked at Bree instead. Before I sit down, I want this documented, in writing. Who authorized the reassignment and when? Boots. Grant's expression hardened. That isn't necessary for travel. It became necessary the moment I was threatened with a non-compliance report for asking you to check your own records. Boots. You're escalating this, Bree said. Vanessa almost laughed. She stopped herself. I haven't raised my voice once. Grant handed her the phone back with the finality of a man closing a door. Boots. If you continue to delay boarding after your seat has been restored, I will note that in the incident report. Boots. There it was again. The story rewriting itself faster than the facts could keep up. Somewhere behind her, a phone came up. Boots. Vanessa heard the small, unmistakable click of a camera app opening, and a man's voice, low, said to whoever he was sitting next to, I'm getting this on video, just in case. Boots. She didn't turn around to see who it was. She didn't need to. Boots. She understood, in that instant, exactly how this could go if she let it. How fast a seating dispute could turn into 40 seconds of someone else's footage, stripped of context, captioned however a stranger felt like captioning it, decided by an audience that would never know about the 211 pages in her briefcase or the 11 months behind them. Boots. That was not the outcome she wanted. She wanted the truth on the record, not a viral clip standing in for it. Boots. You can put the phone down, she said quietly, to no one in particular and everyone at once. I'm not asking for a scene. Boots. I'm asking for the record to be accurate. Those aren't the same thing. The businessman a few rows back lowered his phone half an inch, uncertain, and Vanessa turned back to Grant before she could see whether he put it away entirely. Boots. Something old and fast rose in Vanessa's chest, the instinct to fix this herself immediately with whatever weapon was closest. Boots. She reached into her briefcase and found her attorney's business card between two fingers, then stopped. Calling a lawyer from the aisle would turn a seating dispute into a lawsuit before she even understood what had actually happened. Boots. So she called someone else instead. One number. Highline's Managed Travel Integrity Line, a corporate desk Sterling Bridge's travel department used under their business account, the kind of thing you forget exists until the exact morning you need it. Boots. Her firm's contract with the airline guaranteed immediate preservation of passenger service records whenever a disputed downgrade involved allegations of discriminatory treatment. Boots. Vanessa did not mention lawsuits. She did not raise her voice. She gave her name, her flight number, her seat assignment, and 6 words she'd rehearsed 1,000 times without knowing it. Boots. Please place this record under preservation. The representative asked her to hold. Less than 90 seconds later, the boarding scanner outside the aircraft stopped accepting passengers entirely. Boots. A red warning flashed across the gate monitor. Renata stared at the screen, then looked back into the cabin. It's dispatch, she said. Boots. Flight 5112 is on operational hold. The hold changed the temperature of the cabin faster than any argument had. 2 passengers still waiting in the jet bridge were quietly redirected back toward the gate seating. Boots. The scanner kept refusing Renata's attempts to override it, a flat electronic tone each time she tried. What did you do? Boots. Bree demanded. I asked them to preserve the record, Vanessa said. That doesn't shut down a flight. No, Vanessa said. Boots. It shouldn't. Renata was already on the gate phone, her side of the conversation coming through in fragments. Yes. Flight 5112, we haven't pushed back. Understood. I'll hold the door. Boots. She covered the receiver. Dispatch says we can't depart until passenger integrity clears the cabin event. Grant's voice dropped. Why is passenger integrity involved in a seat dispute? Boots. Renata glanced at Vanessa, then at Bree, because somebody entered a service recovery note against Ms. Reid at 6:38. Vanessa checked her phone. Boots. 6:44. She had boarded less than 10 minutes earlier. What does the note say? She asked. Renata hesitated. Grant answered for her. Boots. Internal records aren't discussed with passengers. Something sharper than the earlier heat moved through Vanessa's chest now. She had been careful. Boots. She had asked for records, not made accusations, and somewhere in the last 6 minutes, someone had apparently been writing a story about her while she stood 5 feet away, saying nothing louder than please check. Boots. Preston Wade, still standing in the aisle, turned toward Bree. You wrote her up before she'd even refused anything. Did he say I wrote something? Boots. Bree snapped, arms folding. Marcus turned toward the galley cabinet. Vanessa caught it. What is it? She asked him directly. Boots. He looked at Bree first, then Grant. Nothing in his face suggested bravery. If anything, he looked afraid. There's a service tablet, he said. Boots. Notes sync through it automatically. Marcus. Stop. Bree's voice cracked like a whip. He did stop, physically, hands pulling back from the cabinet. Boots. But the sentence was already out in the cabin air where nobody could take it back. Grant stepped between them. Boots. No one touches the tablet until corporate tells us what to do. For once, that was the correct decision, and Vanessa gave him that. Boots. She closed her eyes for a second and tried to think past the anger climbing her throat. She called her business partner. Boots. You boarding? Talia Grant answered on the second ring. Technically. A pause. What happened? Wade had already returned to 2C without being asked, laptop under his arm, leaving 2A empty for the first time since Vanessa had boarded. Boots. They gave my seat to someone else, threatened to write me up for asking questions about it, and now corporate has the flight on hold. Boots. Talia was quiet for a beat. Vanessa. No. Your presentation is at 11. If you miss that window, Whitmore reopens the bid to Halbrook and Voss. Boots. Vanessa closed her eyes. That was the part nobody in this cabin could see or would care about. She wasn't traveling for a photo finish or a moral victory. Boots. Sterling Bridge employed 16 people whose mortgages did not care about airline policy. Losing this contract wouldn't destroy the firm. Boots. It would make the next 8 months smaller, meaner, and harder for every one of them. Take the seat if they give it back, Talia said. Boots. Document everything later. Get on the plane. Vanessa looked at 2A, empty now, waiting. For the first time all morning, she wondered whether she'd picked the wrong hill to plant a flag on. Boots. I was about to, she said. Then do it. Renata hung up the gate phone and returned to the cabin door. Boots. Corporate wants the tablet secured and the original printed manifest retained. No edits to any incident report until the preliminary review finishes. Boots. Bree's face changed, not dramatically, but enough. Vanessa saw it. Grant saw it too. What incident report? Grant asked. Boots. Bree's eyes went to the closed cockpit door instead of to him. I started one when Ms. Reid refused the reassignment. Boots. She hadn't refused anything when the note went in, Renata said. Timestamps don't lie the way people do. You weren't even in the cabin. Boots. No, Renata said, but the server was. Marcus stood very still by the coffee maker. Boots. Vanessa understood, finally, why he'd hidden the paper manifest under the binder 10 minutes earlier. Not because he knew exactly what was happening, but because he understood, on instinct, that a physical record might disappear the moment the digital version became official. Boots. Paige, the newest name badge in the galley that Vanessa hadn't even clocked yet, stood frozen near the coffee station, with a stack of napkins still in her hands, watching the whole exchange without saying a single word. Boots. Vanessa caught her eye once, just for a second. The woman looked away first. Not out of guilt exactly, Vanessa thought, but out of the particular fear of a person still in her probationary period who understood that speaking up here could cost her a job she badly needed. Boots. Nobody blamed her out loud for it. Vanessa didn't either. Boots. She simply noticed it, the way she noticed everything, and filed it under the long list of reasons systems like this one kept working for as long as they did. Not because everyone inside them agreed with what was happening, but because enough of them stayed quiet long enough for it to finish happening anyway. Boots. The cabin around them had gone almost unbearably still. Nobody was pretending to read a magazine anymore. Nobody was pretending not to listen. Boots. The air itself felt thinner, the way a room feels right before a decision gets made that nobody in it can take back. The ventilation humming, a luggage wheel, ticking somewhere near row 9. The boarding scanner outside giving its flat electronic refusal every few seconds like a heartbeat that wouldn't settle. Boots. Grant retrieved the tablet himself and set it on the counter without opening the app. Who logged in last? Bree didn't answer. Boots. Preston Wade spoke instead, from 2C, his voice carrying easily across the narrow aisle. I'd like my name included in whatever review happens. Boots. He looked at Grant. I accepted 2A because Miss Collins told me the passenger assigned there had already agreed to move. Boots. Every eye in the cabin swung toward Bree. I said we were handling an accommodation, she said, arms still crossed. Boots. No, Wade said. You said she'd already accepted it. That's not the same sentence, and you know it isn't. The lie was small enough to sound almost ordinary, which, Vanessa thought, watching it land, made it so much worse. Boots. A lie you could believe someone might tell without even planning to. Grant's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then switched to speaker at the caller's request. Boots. A calm, unhurried woman's voice filled the cabin. This is Sasha Delgado, Highline Passenger Integrity. Flight 5112 remains on hold. Boots. This is not disciplinary action against any individual. We are preserving a disputed passenger record ahead of departure. A pause, clipped and precise. Boots. The first service note on this record was entered at 6:38:14. It states that passenger Reid declined a voluntary reassignment and became argumentative. Boots. Vanessa looked at the cabin clock. She remembered exactly where she'd been at 6:38. Boarding scanner shows Ms. Reid stepped onto the aircraft at 6:39:2, Renata said from the doorway. Boots. Silence held the cabin for a full 3 seconds, the kind of silence that has weight, that presses against your ears. Boots. Correct, Sasha said. Grant turned toward Bree. Bree shook her head. Then the timestamp's wrong. System timestamps are server-generated, Sasha said. Boots. They are not entered manually. They cannot be wrong. Bree's jaw tightened. The note had been written before Vanessa had even boarded the aircraft. Boots. That single fact reshaped the entire morning. Vanessa felt less vindicated than sick to her stomach. This wasn't a person reacting badly to her behavior in the moment. Boots. Someone had prepared a version of her behavior in advance. Mr. Ashby, Sasha continued, who was logged into the cabin tablet at 6:38. Boots. Grant looked at the device on the counter. I don't know yet. We do, Sasha said. The credential belongs to Bree Tolliver. Boots. Bree's cheeks colored. I was setting up the cabin. That doesn't mean I wrote anything. Boots. That's precisely why we're reviewing device activity instead of drawing conclusions, Sasha said. And for the first time all morning, Vanessa felt something loosen in her chest. The small, cold relief of watching a system actually check its own work instead of trusting whoever spoke first and loudest. Boots. Marcus raised his hand slightly, almost like a student. There's something else. Grant closed his eyes briefly. What? When Bree saw Mr. Boots wait at the door, she asked me if 2A had boarded yet. He glanced at Bree, then forced himself to keep going. Boots. I said it can be normal cabin coordination. But then she said we can fix this before she gets here. Boots. The words settled into the cabin differently than an insult would have. There was no slur in them. No sentence about race, spoken out loud for anyone to point to later. Boots. Just a quiet decision, made before Vanessa had even reached the jet bridge, that her seat was something movable, something to be handled, before she'd been treated as a person who might object. Boots. Ms. Reid, Sasha said through the speaker, what outcome are you requesting right now? Vanessa glanced toward the open cabin door, toward Denver, toward 11 months of work sitting in a briefcase between her ankles. Boots. She could demand Bree's removal from the flight entirely. She could make this cabin into exactly the kind of spectacle that would be trending online by lunchtime. Boots. I want my original seat assignment restored, she said instead. I want the false note locked from further editing. I want a written explanation of who authorized the reassignment and why. Boots. And I want this aircraft released the moment the records are secure. The other 140 passengers on this flight didn't do anything wrong. Boots. That's our goal as well, Sasha said. A minute later, Renata read a new message at the podium twice before returning to the door. Boots. Hold's been narrowed. Operations can prepare for departure once the device image is captured and crew status is resolved. Bree looked up sharply. Boots. Crew status? Grant's phone buzzed again. He read the message, then turned it toward Bree without a word. Bree Tolliver, you are being removed from duty pending review. Boots. This is not a termination. The distinction seemed to sting worse for being so precise. Bree looked at Vanessa. You got what you wanted. Boots. No, Vanessa said quietly. I wanted you to check the seat. That's all this ever needed to be. Bree said nothing. Boots. Vanessa picked up her briefcase and finally, 14 minutes and one operational hold later, walked to 2A and sat down. Boots. Her phone lit up with a message from Talia. Whitmore moved your slot to noon. I bought you an hour. Boots. Vanessa looked at it for a long moment. She had not, it turned out, handled everything alone after all. Outside, the baggage tug pulled away from the aircraft. Boots. Inside, Flight 5112 still could not close its door, because corporate had secured the record, but not yet the answer to the question underneath it, whether the false note had been one impulsive shortcut or something that had happened before. Boots. A reserve flight attendant arrived 9 minutes later carrying a navy roller bag and the careful expression of someone who'd been told half a story and knew it. Boots. Her name was Paige Alvarez. She checked the crew roster with Grant, then went straight to the forward galley without asking Vanessa a single question, which helped more than anything anyone had said to her that morning. Boots. Vanessa sat in 2A with her briefcase against her ankles and watched the departure process quietly rebuild itself. Safety equipment was cross-checked. Boots. Coffee drawers were relocked. Paige counted first-class passengers against the manifest, while Marcus restocked the service cart with hands that still moved slightly too fast. Boots. Bree had already gone, escorted through the jet bridge by a station manager. No shouting, no public spectacle. Just a quiet removal from duty while the review continued, and the particular silence of a person who has just watched their own story stop being the only version anyone believed. Boots. Preston Wade leaned across the aisle from 2C. Still going to make your meeting? Vanessa checked the seatback display clock. Boots. Barely. What do you do? Risk consulting. He almost smiled. So today's been professionally offensive to you on 2 separate fronts. Boots. Despite herself, she laughed, the first normal sound she'd made since boarding. Then Grant appeared beside her seats. Boots. Reid. Passenger integrity needs one more clarification before we close the door. She looked toward the jet bridge, toward the clock, toward the whole unraveling morning. Boots. Make it quick. He handed her his phone. Sasha was still on the line. We've finished the preliminary device capture, she said. Boots. The tablet confirms the note originated under Bree Tolliver's credentials. But that isn't the only thing we found. Here it was. Boots. The deeper problem underneath the first one. The entry was created from a template, Sasha said. A passenger management shortcut. The wording in your note matches language used in several prior reports from this exact crew pairing. Boots. Grant's head came up. How many? I'm not giving a number until the records are validated. That answer told Vanessa everything the number would have. Boots. This was no longer a question of whether Bree had invented a description in one bad, irritated minute. Someone had developed a repeatable method for turning discretionary seat changes into passenger conduct problems. A template, reused, refined, waiting in a drawer for the next inconvenient passenger. Boots. Vanessa looked toward Marcus. He had gone completely still beside the coffee maker. Did you know about this? She asked him. Boots. Sasha didn't answer for him, Marcus did. I recognized the wording, it looked familiar. Grant turned toward him fully now. Boots. From where? He swallowed. 3 weeks ago there was a woman flying to Nashville. Older lady, black, seat 1D. Somebody moved her mid-boarding and wouldn't tell her why. Boots. She kept asking. Afterward, Bree told the supervisor the passenger had been disruptive. His voice thinned. Her name was Loretta Simmons. Boots. She was 71. What happened to her? Vanessa asked. She got off the plane, removed? No, Marcus said. She left on her own. Boots. Said she didn't want to fight it in front of a whole cabin of strangers. That distinction mattered more than almost anything else said on that airplane, and Vanessa recognized it instantly. It was exactly the kind of quiet, deniable pressure Sterling Bridge's clients paid her to find buried inside supply contracts. Boots. Systems rarely fail through one dramatic act. Sometimes the pressure is engineered so carefully that the person on the losing end simply surrenders the thing in dispute themselves, leaving behind a clean, comfortable record with no complaint attached to it at all. Boots. An elderly woman had walked off a plane in Nashville 3 weeks ago rather than fight for a seat she'd paid for. Boots. And nobody outside that cabin had ever heard about it, because there had been nothing to preserve, no one to call, no 6 words spoken into a corporate hotline before the door closed. Boots. Vanessa felt sick in a new way now, not for herself, but for a woman she had never met. Boots. Ms. Delgado, she said into Grant's phone, I want Loretta Simmons's flight pulled into this review. Whatever this is, it isn't about me. Boots. It's a pattern, and I happen to be the passenger who called before it finished writing itself. There was a pause on the line, brief and deliberate. Boots. Understood, Sasha said. We're already preserving related reports. Thank you for saying so out loud. The door finally closed at 7:19, 38 minutes behind schedule. Boots. No nationwide grounding, no headline-sized catastrophe, just one airplane on one runway, held until the airline could be reasonably sure the record leaving with it was true. Boots. Vanessa spent the flight the way she'd planned to all along, laptop open. 211 color-coded pages spread across the tray table, rebuilding the last piece of the Whitmore model with her hands finally steady. Boots. Preston Wade, across the aisle, spent most of the flight quiet, occasionally glancing over, as if trying to decide whether to say something. Boots. Somewhere over Kansas he did. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry. You didn't put yourself in that seat. Boots. I also didn't ask enough questions about why I was suddenly sitting somewhere better. It surprised her that he'd say it out loud, unprompted, with nobody left in the cabin to perform it for. Boots. When someone tells you a problem's already been solved, he added, it's easy to accept the version that benefits you. Boots. Easy for some people, Vanessa said without heat this time. He didn't argue with that either, which she respected more than an apology would have. Boots. She landed in Denver at 10:52 a.m., 8 minutes ahead of the moved presentation window Talia had negotiated. Boots. She walked into the Whitmore boardroom with her blouse, slightly wrinkled from 4 hours in a cramped seat, and delivered the resilience model without mentioning a single thing that had happened on Flight 5112. Boots. The client had never asked for that story. She had never needed to offer it as evidence of anything. Boots. Sterling Bridge won the contract 2 weeks later, because the model was better, because her newest analyst had caught an assumption everyone else missed, and because a 16-person firm had spent 11 months doing the unglamorous work nobody else wanted to do. Boots. That mattered to Vanessa more than she expected it to. The worst morning of her year did not become the explanation for everything good that came after it. Boots. It simply happened, and then the actual work took over. Highline's investigation closed 4 months later. The findings confirmed 7 unauthorized premium reassigned across 9 months, all tied to the same crew pairing, all following the identical template language Sasha Delgado's team had first flagged on the tablet that morning. Boots. Bree Tolliver's termination stood after internal review, not for one bad decision on one delayed flight, but for a pattern she had built, refined, and used quietly, again and again, on passengers she'd calculated wouldn't push back. Boots. She was not the kind of person to apologize easily, and for weeks after her removal she told anyone who would listen that she had simply been trying to keep her cabin running on time, that she'd never used a slur, never raised her voice, never done anything a review board could call outright cruelty. Boots. She filed an appeal. She hired her own advocate through the union and sat across a conference table from 3 regional directors and repeated, almost word for word, the same sentence she'd used on the airplane. I was handling an accommodation. Boots. She said it so many times that it stopped sounding like an explanation and started sounding like the only sentence she had left. Boots. She kept saying it right up until the airline's regional director slid a folder across the table. Not 1 report this time, but 7, printed and stapled and laid out side by side, the same phrasing repeating across every one of them, like a signature nobody had ever asked her to sign. Boots. Declined voluntary reassignment. Became argumentative, same words, different names, different flights, different years, some of them, going back further than even Sasha Delgado's team had first estimated. Boots. Bree stared at 7 versions of a sentence she had written about 7 different passengers, and for the first time since the tablet had been pulled off that galley counter, she had nothing left to say. Boots. Her union advocate, sitting beside her, had gone quiet too. Losing her job hadn't done it. Losing the presentation contract with Denver hadn't done it. Boots. Seeing her own handwriting, over and over, attached to 7 separate strangers who had never met each other and had never needed to. That did it. Boots. She did not cry in that room. She simply stopped arguing, which for a woman who had never once stopped arguing in 9 years of employee reviews was its own kind of confession. Boots. Highline did not stop at termination. Her certification with the flight attendant union was suspended pending a formal ethics review, and 2 other regional carriers, once the Department of Transportation complaint became part of the public record, quietly declined to consider her application. Boots. Vanessa never asked for any of that specifically. She had only ever asked for the truth to be written down correctly. Boots. It turned out that once it was, the truth did most of the rest of the work by itself. Grant Ashby completed a monitored supervisory assignment and returned to duty with quarterly record integrity audits attached to his team for the following year. Boots. Preston Wade sent Sterling Bridge a formal letter. Not for publicity. He made a point of saying, just because he thought it should exist somewhere in writing, describing exactly what he'd witnessed and confirming Vanessa's account down to the timestamp. Boots. Marcus stayed with Highline. Boots. His statement had helped investigators reconstruct all 7 earlier cases, and the final report didn't turn him into a hero for it either. It noted, plainly, that his reporting had come late, alongside the fact that what he'd preserved under that service binder had ultimately mattered more than his hesitation had cost. Boots. He completed additional training and volunteered for a working group redesigning how cabin reports got logged in the first place. Boots. That balance felt right to Vanessa. Nobody in this story got to be simply good or simply guilty. Loretta Simmons, the 71-year-old woman from the Nashville flight, was located through the airline's outreach process. Boots. She accepted a formal correction to her passenger record and a written apology, and, when asked whether she wanted to pursue anything further, said no, gently, and asked only that the note attached to her name finally be removed so her grandchildren would stop hearing about it from a customer service script every time they booked her a ticket. Boots. Highline made the temporary controls permanent after a labor and safety review. Premium seat changes made after check-in now required a documented reason tied directly to the passenger record. Boots. Conduct descriptions could no longer be entered before the event they claimed to describe. Supervisors reviewing a dispute were now required to open the underlying seat history before relying on any behavioral label at all. Boots. The airline began measuring compliance monthly, and that, to Vanessa, mattered far more than the language in the apology letter that eventually arrived in her office mail and sat unopened on her desk for 3 days before she finally read it. Boots. 2 weeks after the deal closed, Vanessa sat at the end of Sterling Bridge's conference table while Talia passed around takeout containers from the Ethiopian place 2 blocks down. Boots. The Whitmore contract had been signed that afternoon. No dramatic announcement, just a quiet extension, confirming another 18 months of work, 2 additional distribution regions, and enough predictable revenue for Vanessa to finally approve the analyst position her team had put off twice. Boots. You remembered I like the extra spice, she said, sliding a container across the table. I remember everything when I'm owed an apology dinner, Talia said. Boots. Vanessa looked around the room. 3 of her analysts were arguing cheerfully about a forecasting assumption near the whiteboard. Someone's phone charger stretched dangerously across the floor. Boots. The office printer had jammed again, the way it always did on Fridays. It was ordinary, all of it. And she realized she had missed ordinary more than she'd let herself admit. Boots. That night, after everyone else had gone home, she opened the bottom drawer of her desk. Boots. Inside was the original boarding pass she'd printed after Flight 5112, curling slightly at one corner now, Seat 2A still visible in bold black type. A habit her father had taught her: never throw away the first version of anything, because people will later try to convince you it said something different. Boots. Beside it now sat Highline's final correction notice, confirming the false behavioral note had been permanently removed from her travel profile. Boots. 2 records. One described where she was supposed to sit that morning. The other described what the airline had finally admitted had actually happened when someone decided her seat was easier to take from her than it would have been to take from the man sitting across the aisle. Boots. Her father would have kept both of them forever. She suspected she would too. Her laptop chimed with a new message, not from the airline's legal department this time, but from Sasha Delgado directly. Boots. Before Vanessa decided anything further, Sasha wanted her to look at one more anonymized case from a different region. No seat dispute this time. Boots. No VIP passenger involved at all. A traveler had been flagged as a security concern after requesting disability assistance that the station's own records claimed had never been made. Boots. The summary attached was 6 pages long. Vanessa didn't open it yet. She forwarded the message to Talia instead with one line underneath it. Monday morning? Boots. Talia's reply came back almost instantly. Bring coffee. Vanessa closed her laptop, turned off the office lights, and carried the empty takeout containers down the hall toward the sink. Boots. The boarding pass stayed behind her in the drawer, curling a little more at the corner every month. A small paper record of a morning she never asked for and never forgot. Boots. Whatever came next would have to stand on its own record too, written down, checked twice, and never left to whoever spoke first. Boots. If this story stayed with you, not because of how it ended, but because you recognized someone in it, maybe even yourself, take a second to like it, so it reaches the person who needs to hear it today. Boots. Share it with anyone who's ever been told to prove they belonged somewhere they'd already paid to be. And tell me in the comments, have you ever stood in that aisle? boots. On which side of it? I read every answer.